Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome to another enlightening session of modulyss Talks. I'm Barbara, your host for today's webinar. And for those new to our sessions, we bring together design industry experts to share knowledge and ideas both in person at our showrooms across Europe and online. Today, we're diving into the principles of green building practices, the first talk in our three-part webinar series. Our expert speaker today is Sabine Oberhuber, a TED speaker and co-founder of Turn 2. Sabine will guide us through the principles that lie at the heart of green building and how we can change the culture of building to achieve better impact for a better living and working environment. The slides of the presentations are in Dutch, but Sabine will clarify in English everything. Let's dive in and hear from Sabine.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you so much for to the modulyss team for inviting me to this session. I will always start with something which is very, very much to the heart of what we do, and that is the fact that we are acting from the vision that we are guests on this planet. And I think that is a vision and an attitude which we all as designers, as businesses should embrace in order to make this world or keep this world the living place it is and it has been for the whole time of existence, and what we are putting in danger right now. What I'm presenting you today actually is the work of three companies. It's the work of Rauw Architects, which has been on the forefront of green building for more than 30 years. It is also partly the work of Turn 2, the company I'm heading, which is working with clients in the construction industry, but also broader to achieve circular business models and to achieve circularity in the built environments. And it is a platform which is called Madaster, which is enabling circularity in the built environment. So I will guide you through the presentation now. Please, I apologize for the fact that they are in Dutch, but I will speak English and you will be able to follow everything. As I said, the fundamental attitude is that we are guests on that planet, and what it means actually is that we have to adhere to house rules when we are guests somewhere. But the thing is, we have forgotten the house rules. What you see here is in this graph is in fact a model from the Stockholm Resilience Institute, which shows you the planetary boundaries we have to adhere to, which is not only about climate change, something we talk about so often. It is also about the integrity of the biosphere. It is about the land change, something which we very much are involved in the construction industry. It is about fresh water use, etc., etc. So there's a whole range of boundaries which we have to respect when we want to treat the planet in a respectful way. And what we are currently doing is looking very, very unilaterally on actually carbon emissions. That is sort of, it's called also in the literature the carbon tunnel vision, and it does have an effect that we are forgetting all other dimensions which are very, very important and which make us very often take choices which are in fact then having negative effects on other parts of the planetary boundaries which I just laid out. So we need really a system perspective and a system change in order to really achieve and preserve the livable environment which we have inherited from our ancestors. What we have as one of the fundamental flaws in the system is the linear economy. You probably all know that the fact that we are extracting resources, manufacture, and in fact, in the end, create a huge amount of waste. And actually, this amount of waste is growing year by year. And depending on the country, the construction industry is responsible for approximately 40%, in some countries even much more, of this waste. And already in the construction phase, sometimes a third of materials are getting wasted because the design is not made in a way that we are really very consciously treating our materials. And what you see by 2050, it is expected if we go on like that, this amount of waste will have been grown by 1/3. And on your right-hand side, as you as a construction experts know, is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, just to give it perspective to those two quarters which you are just seeing here. So, and one of the other problems we have, and that is why this is also growing, that we have built our economy on exponential growth. And just to let you see what the construction industry is contributing to that, is what you see here is the amount of cement the construction industry has been using in the 20th century in the United States. And this is what China just used in 3 years, from 2011 to 2013. We are now 11 years ahead. I don't have an actual graph, but it probably will have grown a lot since then even. And that's also true for the whole construction industry worldwide. So we are having to do with an enormous amount of materials we are using and which we are wasting. And about 50% of all the materials we are using is also necessary to maintain everything what we already have. So as soon as we add a building, we have to maintain it. So it means that we have a sort of 1.5 extra extraction from our earth systems. And that means that we really have to rethink what we're doing, and certainly in the construction industry. So one of the first principles of green building is to build and design in a circular way. And what does that mean? We're talking about the R principles in the circular economy, which is when you have the circular goals, which is impact, it's the prolonging of the lifespan, and it is the preservation of materials. So the red is input reduction, blue is lifespan, and green is preservation of material. And then you have different strategies to achieve that, which is, on the one hand, in the very first phase, you can refuse, rethink, and reduce your material input. And that is very much a phase where you as designers have a lot of impact on how you design your buildings, the parts of your buildings, that they can be adhere to these principles. Then you have reuse, repair, refurbish, and remanufacture, or repurpose, which means that you have to make sure that the buildings you design are prepared for these strategies as well. And at the end, you have recycle and recover. And when you see, in fact, design and production is something where you have to think all those R's through in the very first phase. So you have to really make sure that products are fit, or buildings are fit for all those R's. From do I use less material to will I be able to reuse this material again in the future? When you talk about lifespan, then you talk about the phases where you reuse or repair or repurpose. And in the end, the people who are busy with material harvesting, like recycling companies, but more and more so marketplaces for reused materials, they are much more in the lower ladders of steps of the R ladder, as we call it. And all that together means that we need an 11th R, which is the R for responsibility. We really have to take responsibility for everything we make. What does that mean? Is I want to share some practices from our own office, Rao Architects. We always go, if we get a request from a client, look at what is already there. So we perceive the built environment as a material mine, and this building actually was supposed to be knocked down and a new building put next to it on the green area, which you see behind the building. We say, no, this is not responsible. There's so much embedded carbon in this building that we are going to preserve that building. So we are going to rethink and reuse and improve everything what we find here. So what we did, we reused all the skins of the buildings, but we also used what we found inside. So we reused the sanitary, we repurposed clothing from the employees for the insulation, we repurposed cable drums we found, as it was an energy producing company. They had big cable drums, and we converted them into the wooden facade. But very importantly, we were also very ambitious about everything which we created anew, that would be circular, meaning that it could be reused at the end of its lifespan. And one of the things which we found was very important was this big construction, the big steel roof on top of the building, which would connect everything. And we wanted to use as less material as possible, as you could see from the R letter. But we also wanted to make sure that we can reuse it in the future. And what we did was we were looking for companies who could provide us with such a roof, but we couldn't find them in the construction areas, let's say. So we were thinking, what industry is capable of designing structures which you can easily assemble, disassemble, reassemble, and which you can easily transport, and which use really little material. And we came up with a roller coaster company, and we actually approached a Belgian roller coaster company to help us design the roof. And they first thought they were crazy, but then we were telling them, you probably can design a horizontal roof. And that is exactly what they did. So here you see the roof structure of the building, and you see still the roller coaster structure in here. And what it did, it was more than 30% less steel, over 30% less steel, which we needed for this construction. And yes, like a Kermis attraction, you can a fun fair attraction, you can dismantle it and reconstruct it again and again. So what you see here is in fact the building which I just showed you with this roof, and this is how it looks from the outside. And it's also an energy producing building, so we were also thinking of how to make sure that this building can provide not only its own energy, but provide also for the part of what the neighborhood was needing in terms of energy. This is another building we built 4 years ago. It was opened. It's the building of a Triodos Bank, and actually it was conceived as a materials bank. And what we did is we were thinking of how can we create a building which is on the one hand suited to the needs of the client, and at the same time made up of modular components which we could as soon as we would dismantle the building, could be reused in any other structure. So what you see here are these wooden structural elements, and we produced them for every floor, and they are standardized, and they were just brought to the building site and assembled. So we did not build in the classic sense anymore, but we had them prefabricated, and they were brought to the building site, which was also a very sensitive area, which I will show you in a minute. And so we could bring down construction time, but we also could make sure that this building is completely circular. And in fact, it has only dry connections. So this building was screwed together, in fact, with more than 160,000 screws. And when it is not needed anymore, we can remove the screws and take the building apart again. It was the office building of the year. So we can see green buildings can also be very beautiful and very functional buildings. And it had also the prize for nature inclusive building, because what we did is the shape which you saw is actually adjusted to the flights of the bats which were on the area and which are protected. It has a green roof to make sure that it contributes to the biodiversity. The building came together with a whole plan how to revive this area around it and make sure that actually the fact that the building came there made funds free in order to really enhance the biodiversity on the plot. So what you see here is the structure, and it is respectful of the flight of the bats, as I see, and you see the green roofs here. But we did not only think about the health of the surrounding, we were also thinking about the health of the people using the building. So it is made with only natural materials. There's a lot of felt, there's a lot of wood, there's a lot of materials and so the woolen insulation, which is not only bio-based, so contributing to the environment, having a very, very low footprint, but it is also very well for the well-being of people using this building. Of course, it's also an energy neutral building, and partly we get the energy from a large solar roof on the parking lot, which was the first bi-directional charging station in the Netherlands. So underneath you could charge electric cars, and everything you would not need would be exchanged with a building, and vice versa. So that was a sort of a mini grid which we realized on the site. It is also a building which it works with a very intuitive ventilation system, natural ventilation system with heat pumps. It collects the water for the toilets. So the whole energy and insulation system is also completely adhering to the latest standards, or even pushing the boundaries for what green building actually means. And this building has received a lot of awards actually for being a leading green building. What was also important, not only for this building, but for other buildings which we realized, and actually what we realize with clients also outside of the construction industry, is new business models. And with these new business models here also can achieve a lot of impact. And one thing we created was a light as a service together with Philips. So as an architect, you can also think together with a client, how do we structure our bids or the bids, the proposal, the tenders for bids, in order to get a different and more a better answer to fulfill your green ambitions. And that is an example we did for Schiphol Airport. We had the question that Schiphol Airport needed lighting for 15 years for this lounge. And everything which would be available at the market at the time, and LED lighting, the most energy efficient lighting, would only last for 6 years. So we started doing a tender saying we are looking for a company which can provide us with a service light for 15 years. And with turning the question around, saying we are only buying light and we're not buying the lighting equipment, meant that Philips in that case would remain the owner of the lighting equipment. And they suddenly were burdened with this problem we had before, namely that the installation would only last for 6 years. So they looked at it, and because it was a really bad business model, being delivering light and having to install the whole lighting system 3 times in the course of 15 years, they went back to their design tables, looked at the lighting equipment, and discovered that it was only a little driver which would break down after 6 years. But the driver was built into the lighting equipment in such a way that you would have to dismantle everything and trash everything. And by going back to the design table, they changed the whole setup of the lighting equipment. Now the driver is under a little lid in front of the installation, and it can be exchanged. The whole system is monitored by Internet of Things, IoT. And now Philips can guarantee uptime for 15 years or even longer. And what you see here is, as they redesigned the whole equipment, it is not only good for maintenance, as you see, the red one was the old and the blue one is the new. It's good for maintenance, but it also can be upgraded. It is modular and it is made for disassembly. So as Philips is the owner, once Schiphol does not need the lighting anymore, it can be taken out, it is modular, it can be reconfigured and sold to another client. And I think this thinking in several cycles is something very, very important for everything we do, not only for lighting, but for every building, for every product we put into the market. This is another example, a little bit even closer to the construction industry, that is a lift installation by Mitsubishi, which do exactly the same thing. They sell it as a service. You pay, you can choose for paying by movement, and actually it is made in a way that it can be completely disassembled. And this installation is made to last for 40 years, and it is already built as a material depot for Mitsubishi company to be able to reuse either materials or the components in future products or future lifts they will produce. Very important to be able to reuse in the future is documentation. So what we came up with years ago was the idea that every material, every product, every building should have a material passport. But because we said material is waste is a material without identity. So what you see here is not a artificial skiing ramp. It's the waste piling up in the street of Beirut after a few days after it could not be shipped abroad. So this is sort of a striking image of the amount of waste which can pile up very quickly, and that is only household waste and not construction waste. So we came up with this concept of the material passport and started to equipping our own buildings with it for a while, but then realized we really have to create something which is scalable and where the whole built environment can be mapped at a certain point in time, so that we have an inventory of the urban mine. And that's what we did in 2016. We started with the idea of Madasta, the cadastre for materials, or the land registry for materials. That's a more common word in English. And what it does is you can upload your building information model, and a software will automatically calculate all the materials which are in your building and where they are located. You can also then drill down in this database to really identify not only which material, but actually each component and where it came from. The platform will you also give a circularity index. It will also calculate the residual material value of your building, and it will also give you insight on the embodied carbon of the building. So it is it has become an instrument over time where asset owners can really fully document their buildings. And for architects, it gives guidance on where to enhance their design in terms of circularity, embodied carbon, and all those metrics which we have nowadays in order to design a green building. So this is it's a European ecosystem. It's now active in 8 European countries. The UK by now is green as well. It has been launched in Austria just recently. So it is a platform which is very widely adopted, and it is co-developed by the whole construction industry, from architects to financial institutions to people providing building materials, asset managers, large asset owners, and everybody has his own requirements, and that is exactly what we achieve with Madasta, that it can suit the requirements of the whole construction industry and every individual stakeholder in order to facilitate circularity in the built environment.
Install, use, recreate. Install, use, recreate. Install, use, recreate. Everything is temporary. Only the consequences are permanent. The sun makes nature infinitely available. Data makes materials in a circular economy infinitely available. In a linear economy, materials get wasted. Finitely available. Mining, construction, consumption, demolition, waste. Depreciated buildings, materials without an identity. The Earth is a closed system. Once it's gone, it's gone. In a closed system, all materials are limited editions. Let's go back. The final destination becomes the starting point. Hindsight becomes forethought. Write-off becomes write-down. Anonymity becomes identity. Worthless becomes valuable. Buildings become material depots. Real estate becomes mobile estate. CO2 production becomes CO2 investment. Install, use, recreate. Install, use, recreate. Madasta, the cadastre of materials, documents the identity of materials, allowing them to acquire and retain value and ultimately be reused again and again. This results in visibility, knowing what materials are where, collaboration, effective internal and external communication, value, financial and residual value of materials, insights, analyze and manage circularity, and carbon. Communication, passports to support certification and compliance. Documenting existing buildings leads to material mines. Documenting new buildings leads to material depots. Valuation of materials leads to buildings as a material bank. Madasta makes finite materials infinitely available. Install, use, recreate. Material with an identity always keeps its value. Madasta.
So the vision with which we created Madasta is actually that we create a library of materials, whereas exactly you do in a library, as long as you need something, you take it out, you take it home, you can use it, you can read it. But when you are done with it, you give it back to the big library so that someone else is able to use it. And this documentary is what this system of the library management is actually what Madasta is for the built environment. What is very, very important, as I just said, is collaboration. And this is an example of a project we did with the Dutch railways. It's not a built building, but what we saw is, due to the fact that we were collaborating as a team with the whole chain, we could achieve so much better results. In that case, we could reduce the carbon footprint of that project by 75% in comparison with our other projects. And I see that collaborating and at an early stage, already from the design phase until the realization, brings so much more insight from all parties to how to achieve circularity, how to achieve better, greener projects. So I think that is a very, very important one. And last but not least, I think it also begins with mind change. So being aware what and wherefore we are doing this, and also be courageous about it. So this is an image of our own office years ago when we first started asking Philips to deliver us light in our office, light as a service. We had this man and Mr. Houtink, he came to us and he wanted to sell us lighting equipment. And we said, no, we wanted light as a service. And then he said, after having thought about it for some hours, came back to us and said, I want to do that with you, but provided you don't talk with my boss about it. So he was really taking the risk of doing something completely new, knowing that he didn't have the backup of his boss, but he found out that it was a very important thing to do. And as soon as he was ready, his boss was very happy, and the CEO of Philips even got a Forbes award and a World Circular Economy Forum award for the project, actually. And my encouragement is to everybody I'm talking about is, wherever you are in an organization, you have possibilities to make a change. And if you happen to be the boss of an organization, make sure that people come to you and tell you, and that you can support such a project. Last but not least, it's also very much your own intrinsic motivation. For me, it is actually my children. Thinking in generations is something I think we really have to get accustomed to again. I'm here at a conference in Amsterdam where I was listening to an elder yesterday, and indigenous people very from a cultural perspective, we're trained to think about the 7 generations ahead, the impact of their actions on the 7th generation ahead. So that is something which is to us would be quite revolutionary. We cannot even think, I think, 10 years ahead. That is already out of scope for most investors. So I think changing that attitude and really thinking of what our impact is, not only for us, but for the future generations living on this planet, is really essential. Thank you very much. And as a rounding up, I borrowed a quote from the Patek Philippe, which I just showed you. And what is driving me is the conviction that we are allowed to use material, but we actually only taking care for it for the next generation. Thank you very much. And if you want to know more, we have published a book on the whole concept of circularity in the built environment, circularity for a new economy. It's available in Dutch, in German, in English, and in Italian, and Japanese if you speak from next year. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Sabine, for this interesting presentation. We learned a lot. It starts with our mindset, and I think that's a good beginning for making impact and to achieve more by your own mindset. Yeah. We have a question already here that is from Kenneth. Maybe we take some time from the questions that are put in. Here I have, what innovations are on the horizon for green building technologies and practices?
I think the whole question of digitization is a very, very important one. There is a lot of technology also powered by AI to enable us to map things much more diligently, to know what the impact of our designs are. So I think there's a lot of innovation coming now from the digital space.
Yeah. Let's see if there are Other questions coming in? Anyone? Please. Learning by your presentation, you talked about collaboration. You mentioned some earlier projects where you made collaborations with different stakeholders. It's very important by being at the start of the project where you can line out your wishes, your goals, and to put it all together for a good mindset and together with this collaboration, I think.
Yes, I think it's very important to already talk with everybody who is involved, which means that that you can create an integral solution where you have so much more expertise on the table, but you don't have don't run into a situation where you would maybe want to achieve something green or circular, or and then you are too far in the process, and you would have this becomes too expensive to redesign, etc. So I think it's very important to have everybody from the beginning on the table. And even if you are looking at a renovation project or refurbishment project, there are so many parties which now also can help you with what you can do with the existing material. So I think very important at a very early stage to involving the right parties, and not, for example, let somebody come and knock the building down and make it to gravel and somewhere put it under the road. But there is a lot of value.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I have a question from Iris. And she has the question related to the lighting project in your own office. Could you elaborate on the difference between lighting equipment and lighting services? And perhaps on how Philips practicalized your request.
Yes, what they did is we paid them for delivering light to our service. Schiphol pays them for delivering light, but they are remaining the owners of the product they deliver, and they are also responsible for the energy bill of that lighting. So that means we pay a fixed fee, and for Philips, it's very, very attractive now to make a product which is lasting long, but also which uses as little energy as possible. And we could save about 50 to 60% of the energy consumption, because they are capable of making sure that this lighting as such is very energy efficient. And secondly, installing all sorts of sensors and mechanisms so that we maximize the use of daylight.
Yes, yes, yes. And reduce the energy costs.
Exactly.
I have a question of Hendrik. How do you see floor as a service in practice?
Yes, I think there is. We did an experiment with at the time Deso. I think it's now part of Target, and I think it is absolutely a model which could be very, very beneficial for the flooring industry, because if you make sure that you have your hands on the carpet, you have not only a continuous relation with your client, you can offer them additional services such as cleaning, such as maybe if there are tiles, you can reconfigure them and adjust them to their needs. But in the end, you also have a grip on your resources. As Walter Stahel said, the products of today are your resources of tomorrow for the prices of yesterday.
Yeah, that's very true. And the cost of ownership and also for circularity is a good goal.
Yes, and I think totally ownership is something which is very, very important, which we have.
I have another question, Sabine. It's from Seran. Regarding the cost, does the process of reusing, recycling materials cost more or less than using new materials? Also, do they lose some of their structural integrity?
That is a question where there's no one size fits all answer. It very much depends on market conditions. We have certainly, for example, recycled plastics. Market prices fluctuate together with the oil price. So sometimes it's very, very attractive to have recycled material, and sometimes it's they're not being bought, which is a pity. So there needs to be regulation, and it's coming to make recycled material mandatory. And does it use some of its structural capacities? That is also yes and no. If you look at, for example, aluminum, no, and the impact of recycled aluminum in comparison to new aluminum is huge. So for steel, it depends on what alloys you added to the steel. So it is very very complex matter. But luckily, there are a lot of experts and still more experts out there, which can guide you on all this nitty-gritty material questions.
Yeah. And there's every time there's more development and things that work out better. Practice.
Exactly.
And
I just happened to come across a company in the Netherlands who can recycle all the alloys and all the metals they come across, and even make their own recipes suited to the needs of their clients. And their recipes are made in a way that they can also decompose the alloys again.
Yeah.
So that is a very interesting development,
Yes.
and I think we'll see much more of that in the future.
Yeah. I have another question by Juliana. She asked, is it possible to know again the name of the website for circular materials? I think the Madaster website, maybe, that is what they asked for. But it will be in the presentation that we share, I think, Sabine, or not?
There's the Madaster is you can find it very easily on www.madaster.com, and you can find also the link on YouTube. So that is it's very easy to find it. Yeah.
I hope that is the answer for this question.
Yeah.
Let me see if there is another one. Could you share about biggest challenges seen on materials used in construction?
On material.
Yeah.
I think one challenge we are going to have certainly is pricing and availability. I think that is something we really have to be very conscious of. That the disruption of supply chains will be something which we will have much more. We have seen a first glimpse of it, what was coming during COVID. I think that is certainly something which we have to be aware of. And I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. I have no questions left incoming. So thank you, Sabine, again for this clarifying presentation. It has come to an end. Thank you, Sabine, for this enlightening view. All the details about these talks, including access to the recording of today's Modulyss talks, will be sent to you via email. Looking ahead, we're excited to announce our upcoming webinar on innovation and technology for green building practices. If you'd like to be among the first to register, we invite you to subscribe to our newsletters. By doing so, you will be the first to receive updates about this exciting new series of webinars. Thank you all for joining us and looking forward to see you in our next series. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.